a letter to a church in one of the most influential cities of the ancient world, from the most influential apostle ever known. A man who had never even met many of the believers to whom he wrote. This letter lays the foundation for their faith, for our faith, and explains how a people entrapped in sin and slavery can be reconciled to the perfect, just, and righteous God of the universe. This letter that became a biblical book that has shaped church history perhaps more than any other. This is Paul's letter to the Romans.
Well, good morning, NorthPoint. Always good to see you. We're going to continue our series in Romans, and it's on page 911 in your chair Bibles. While you're looking that up, let me ask you this question. Why are you here? What are you doing here? Why are we doing church, what we're doing here together today? And I imagine that there's a lot of different paths that you could take to get here, or reasons why you might be here. For some of you, maybe it was because you were raised in church, or your parents or your grandparents went to church. And as I've often said, we're Midwesterners, so a lot of Midwesterners just think you should go to church. It's probably something you should do. And so maybe that's what brought you here. You're like, well, it's kind of a moral obligation. I probably should do that. Others of you, maybe it's maybe the socialization. You're like, it just seems like that could be a decent place maybe to meet some people. It seems like a decent group of people that probably are not into organized crime or doing meth. So maybe I could find some friends. Maybe I could even find a spouse at a church, and that might be a good place to find out. So maybe that. Maybe someone invited you. You just had a friend that you know and you respect them. You're like, yeah, I should go because they invited me. I want to be kind to them, so I'll go. Maybe some of you are kind of forced to be here, like you're a kid or you're a teenager, and eating meals and having a place to live is sort of dependent on you coming to church with your parents. So maybe that's why you're here. And then I imagine there's a group of you that are like, well, I believe that God exists. I believe that he gave us the Bible. I believe that Jesus came. I've trusted in him. I believe that the church is his idea. It's the thing that he came up with, and I value it. And so that's why I'm here, because I want to follow God and I want to grow in him. There's many reasons that you might be here or be watching online today during this service. And the first thing I want you to know is that for whatever reason you have come here and you've ended up here and you've ended up watching, I'm glad that you're here. And I hope that you keep coming, and I do hope you hear the message of Jesus, and I hope you connect with God, and I hope you grow, and I hope you find what God has for you in this place. And then I want us to push into this question a little bit more. Why are we here? Why do we do church? You know, there are around 350,000 congregations, churches in the United States of America. So apparently, a lot of people think that they should go to church and that church is a good idea. So we could just default to that. We could just do it because we're supposed to do it and you probably should do it, or we can do it on purpose. We can do it purposefully. And I want us as followers of Jesus to go that way, to do church on purpose and to know why we are here and what we are doing. Paul helps us with that as he explains to the Roman Christians why he's writing this letter to them and why he's so eager to visit them. If you remember, Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles. That is, he's the apostle, the follower of Jesus that is supposed to take the message of Jesus outside of Jerusalem, outside of Israel, to the rest of, really, for him, the Roman Empire, and to spread the message of Jesus in the first century around the world. And so what he would do is he would go to a new town, he would preach the gospel of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection to them, he would present Jesus to them. Those who trusted and said, yes, we believe that message, Jesus is from God, this is the way, then he would establish a church with them. He would establish leaders, and then once it was established, he would move on to the next place and do the same thing over again. Now, sometimes when he was away from these churches that he established, he would write letters back to them to continue to teach them and encourage them. And so if you open up the pages of the second half of the Bible, what we call the New Testament, you're going to find all sorts of letters that Paul wrote, like the one to Colossians and Ephesians and Galatians and Thessalonians, are letters he wrote to actual churches and actual people living in the first century, followers of Jesus, to continue to encourage them when Paul was away from them planting other churches. Now, this letter, though, that he wrote to the Romans is a little bit different, because he never actually visited Rome. He didn't actually establish that church, but he had longed to, and he had planned to visit them for a long time. And so he writes them this letter in advance of his visit to get them prepared for him coming. And we saw this back on our first week in the context of Romans. We began to see, why did Paul actually write this letter? What were his reasons for writing? And this is what we saw, that Paul really is writing Romans for three reasons. First of all, he wrote to them because of a personal connection. Now, he had never been there before, but he had met a number of people from the church on his other missionary journeys. In fact, Christians were kicked out of Rome for about 5 years. And when Roman Christians were kicked out of Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire, they went to other places, and they happened to go to some places where Paul was at and where he was traveling around. So he knew them. Now those Christians are apparently back in Rome, and so he writes to them a bunch of greetings in chapter 16. Greet this person, greet that person, greet this person. And he's establishing a personal connection with them. He wants to, as he goes to this place, reunite with those Christians he knows, and also get to know a number of other Christians in the Roman Empire and make this personal connection with them, whereby he might encourage them, they might encourage him. We'll see more of that today. The second reason he writes is he wants to establish in Rome an operational base. Rome was an influential place that had influential Christians. Paul's desire is to push westward from Rome into Spain, but he's going to stop in Rome on the way to encourage them to encourage him, support him on his missionary journey as he continues to take the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. And so Paul wants to establish a sort of operational base with them. And then lastly, we're going to notice that he's writing a foundational document for the Roman Christians and for all churches in all times. Romans is the greatest and deepest theological letter that we have in the New Testament, explaining the gospel of justification to us and our relationship with God. And so I think in part for Paul to try to prove to this church his credentials, that he's really an apostle, and to seek to encourage them, he writes the book of Romans, his longest theological letter to them. And so what we said is that Paul's really writing this letter for three reasons. It's for relationships, it's for mission, and it's for truth. Now, next week, we're going to look a little bit more at the third reason, the foundational document, that this is a document of truth, from verses 16 through 17 of chapter 1. But the section we're going to look at today, verses 8 through 15, they really explore the first two reasons for Paul's writing. And it helps us with this why church thing. It really answers that question, like, what is this all about? What are we all about? And why are we here? So check it out in Romans chapter 1 and verse 8. He says this, "First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world." They're influential people. Verse 9, "God, whom I serve in my spirit in preaching the gospel of his Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you. I'm remembering you constantly in my prayers at all times, and I pray that now at last, by God's will, the way may be open for me to come to you." You see Paul's heart, right? And his intention. I want to come to you. I want to see you. And so I've been thanking God for you, and I'm praying for you, and I'm praying this would happen. Verse 11, "I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong." Paul wants to bring something to them. And probably by spiritual gift there, he means his teaching and preaching and further explanation of the gospel. In fact, a part of what he does in the rest of the book of Romans is like preparing for the kind of spiritual gift he's going to bring to them of his teaching. And then he says, that is, verse 12, "that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith." Here we find the first reason for Paul's writing and the first reason for why we do church. And are you ready for it? It's going to be incredibly profound. I know you've never heard this before. It's to be together. We do church to be together. Verse 10, Paul says, "I'm praying that I could come to you." Verse 11, he says, "I long to see you. I strongly desire, and I've desired for a long time to see you." Verse 13, he's going to say, "I've planned many times to be able to come and to see you." Like, bro really wants to see them. He wants to be in the same room, face to face with them, to be present in the same space for relationship, for connection. You know this. You know how FaceTime and Zoom and texting is so helpful, especially when you're away from family or friends for an extended period of time. Or maybe you live in a separate place, a separate location than your family does. It's amazing to be able to just jump on your phone and to see them over this technology we have. Since my mom passed away, we got my dad on Marco Polo. You know what it is? It's like videoing back and forth. And it is great, right? Because like at any time I could pick up my phone, I could send my dad a video, he could send me a video. We've talked and chatted more than we have in my entire life because of the technology Marco Polo. So it's great, it's really great. And you know that too. It's great to have those opportunities. But you also know something else. There is absolutely nothing like being face to face with a person that you love, that you can hug, that you can touch, that you can see, where you can actually feel the love in the same space in the room face to face. You've all seen these videos, right, of a military person who is maybe on assignment overseas somewhere, and then they show up, like, say, at a baseball game and surprise their family by their presence, and all of a sudden, they're crying and hugging, and you're crying because you're watching this, and you're so drawn into it because it is absolutely amazing. There's nothing quite like being in the same space with each other. And so that's what Paul wants. And that is what the church is for. It's to be together. The core level of what it means to be the church and to do what we're doing here is not some hyper-spiritual thing. It is to be together, to see each other for relationships. And that's what the church provides. You know, the technology that we have today, it really is amazing. And like the technology to be able to stream our services. And a number of you right now that are watching online, it's amazing that you're able to do this. A number of our people have health issues that keep them inside and they can't get out and they can't get to this place. Some of you sometimes are sick and you shouldn't be here sometimes when you're sick. And so you watch online, or the weather that we had last week, you're traveling and you can watch. It's so good to be able to do that. And yet if you can get here, if you can be here in the same space, you need to get here. You need to be here to do this together. That's what the church is for. It's for relationships. Now, these relationships that we have in the church are characterized by a couple of things that Paul gives to us here. And you notice the first thing that he says these relationships are characterized by in verses 8 through 10 is they're characterized by thanksgiving and prayer, right? When Paul's away from this church, his longing and his desire for connection with them is growing because when he thinks about them, he's like, I am thanking God for you and how God's working in you. I'm so grateful for some of the relationships I have and more relationships that are going to come. And so that leads me to pray for you, to pray that God would be with you and that he would work in you and that I could come and that I could see you. When we thank God for the people in our lives and we pray for them, it grows the desire. It grows the longing. It grows the connection. One of the best ways to connect with other people when you're apart from them is to say, God, would you guide them? Would you direct them? Would you help them? Would you work in them? And there's a gratitude in your heart for the people that God has put in your life. That's a positive, life-giving environment that leads to the second thing, mutual encouragement. So that this spirit of togetherness with thanksgiving and prayer, and then verses 11 through 12, mutual encouragement. Notice how Paul says it. In verse 11, I long to see you so that I might impart to you some spiritual gift. I want to make you strong. That is, that you and I would be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. So this church, this together thing, it is intended to meet your relational and spiritual needs. But you notice that primarily happens through mutual encouragement, meaning I give and I also receive. It's reciprocal. It all works together. It's kind of interesting the way that Paul actually says this, and some of the commentators pick up on this. Notice how it's written. Paul says, I long to see you that I can impart some spiritual gift to you. It's like, I'm going to bring something to you. Like, there's a little bit of like, I'm the Apostle Paul, called by God, and I'm going to bring you a spiritual gift. Well, I mean, we're going to mutually encourage each other. He almost catches himself as he's writing it, right? Because he realizes, I'm not just bringing something to you, you're bringing something to me. This is a body of Christ thing where we all have parts and we all mutually encourage one another. It's like, I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. Is that Barney? Is that what that was? That just came to mind this morning when I was preparing. Okay, so it's like that. Barney taught us something, right? We give and we receive. You need other people. And you have something to bring to others. You have a spiritual gift from God. I don't know if you've ever considered that. Have you considered that? You have spiritual gifts that God has given you to bring to his church. You have a contribution to be made here. In the church, for the church, with the church. And I think a part of spiritual growth, particularly in the culture in which we live, is a move from attending church to engaging with the church together. And it's a bit of a move. I notice this sometimes. It's a bit of a move in each of our hearts where we move from, hey, what are you guys doing? What is the church doing? What are you talking about? To, what are we doing? It's an us together. It's a we are a part of this thing that's going on. And so a part of spiritual growth is that movement from attending to engaging with the church. Most of us, because of the Western culture, the American culture we live in, there are a lot of different church options that are out there. If we were in other parts of the world, you might have one church option, and so you got to learn to get along with the people that are there because that's the church that you go to. We have a lot of different options that are out there here. And so most of us at some point in our lives go through this process of, what church do I want to go to? We even call it church shopping sometimes, right? And you check out different churches, and when you go, you're assessing. And hopefully you're saying, God, do you want me to go here? Is this the church? But also you're just thinking like, do I like the teaching? Do I like the direction? Do I like the feel of the church? Do I like the leaders? Does it have things for my kids? Or does it have Bible studies? Or does it do missions? And you just have these things and you're assessing, do I want to attend this church? One option that you make sometimes is, no, I'm not going to attend that church. And you make that decision. And we live in a place where you get the option to do that. But if you make the decision, you say, that's my church. I'm going to attend that church. I'm going to line up with that church. I'm in. You need to move at some point from attending that church to contributing in that church, to engaging fully with that church together, to what Paul says here is mutual encouragement together. What are we doing? What is God calling us into? That's what the church is for. And you know, when you do that, what you end up finding out is like, these people love me. This is an exciting place to be. My needs are being met, and I'm bringing something to other people, right? And they're giving to me, and I'm giving to them, and there's mutual encouragement happening and taking place. That's what the church is for. You know, there is a bit of, when it comes to the church, you get out of it what you put into it. This is a biblical principle. The Bible says it this way: you reap what you sow. What you sow is what you reap. There is a correlation between those two things. And you know that that's true. It's true for exercise. What you put into it is typically what you get out of it. It's true for the influences in your life. The kinds of things that you take in and receive, is that it produces those kinds of things in your life. It's true with friendships, and it's true in the church too. We get out of it what we put into it. Now, we all have seasons of our lives where we can't give very much to the church and to these relationships. Some of you that are in the church right now, you're in those times. And we have people right now that are in the hospital, that are in the ER, that have had the death of a loved one, that are having mental health struggles. And so every single one of us has these seasons in our lives where you need to receive from the church, you need to be cared for, you need to be loved, you need to be taken care of. That's really good. There are those times. But coming through those times and learning through those times and receiving grace from the church through those times, and in most of our seasons, all of us have a contribution to be made to the church, with the church, for the church together, to give and to receive. And we have to take some steps towards not just receiving when we come into this place. You know that, right? I know you know that. It's getting a little bit more quiet right now, okay? But I love you. That's why I'm telling you this, right? We have to move from simply receiving from the church, whether it is this church or whatever church. You know, we kind of have this perspective at NorthPoint. We love you. We want you here. If God wants you here, we want you here. But we have another perspective too. There are a lot of good churches in the Des Moines Metro. And so if there's one that is preaching the gospel and you really love and you're on board with and you can get involved in, then do that, right? I'm not saying I don't want you here. I want you here. But hear me clearly. I more want what God wants for you, which is not just to receive from a church, but to give and to be a part of what God is doing. And so look, all of you that are here on Sunday mornings and you sit in these services and you watch online, you get to come every single week and you receive a great band and good music and good coffee and decent preaching, right? And childcare, right? You get to receive all of those things, and it's wonderful. And I said, you keep receiving, keep coming, keep gathering that in, keep growing and maturing and all of that, but then make the move to contribute, because you have a contribution, you have a role, you have a part. It's mutual encouragement. So what has God given you to contribute? What has God given you to contribute? I don't have these up on the screen for you, but three things I want to mention that I think God wants every single one of us to contribute. The first thing he wants us to contribute is relationships. We're contributing a sense of, I need some closer relationships, some closer connections that I can give to and receive from with followers of Jesus. Maybe other friends as well, but you need some followers of Jesus in your life, right? So there's a commitment to some relationships, some deeper relationships. You can't have 150 friends in the church, okay? Like deep friendships, but you might be able to find 2, 3, 4, or maybe through your small group or Bible study or something like that. So relationships are a part of this. The second thing is I think God's calling us to contribute a spirit, meaning an attitude, and being a part of the culture, particularly for NorthPoint, of grace and truth. That I'm committed to the grace and the truth of Jesus Christ. That's who he is. That's what God has called our church to. And so I'm going to be a part of the grace and truth culture, loving the truth of Jesus and doing everything with grace, having a demeanor of grace, an approach of grace, meeting people where they are. And so I'm going to contribute that attitude and that spirit to this place that God's called me to be a part of. So relationships, a spirit. And then the third thing would be there needs to be some kind of action. Like some kind of actual service and a commitment of my time and my resources with the gifts that God has given to me to bring to the church. And so many of you do this. Many of you are there. Some of you are incredible encouragers, and that is the gift that God has given to you, and you bring it to the church and you encourage. There are some of you that I think I could stand up here on a Sunday morning and I could give the worst message of all time, and afterwards you'd be like, that is amazing, thank you so much. And I'm like, just keep coming and telling me that it's great. I appreciate it, but no, it wasn't very good today, So I know sometimes, but you just have that gift. You just want to lift up and encourage. Use that, bring it to the church. Some of you are teachers or you are leaders, bring that. Some of you have discernment and counsel, right? And God has given you a spirit of wisdom, and so bring that. For some of you, it's compassion. You have so much compassion and grace and empathy for people. For some of you, it's service, where you're just like, where do you need help? What can I do? What are we doing, and how can I get involved and engage with that? Some of you bring prayer to this place. Some of you bring suffering. And I know you don't want to choose that gift, but some of it God has chosen it for you, and he has put you through some very difficult things and allowed you to suffer so that he could show you his grace and allow you to be able to understand the suffering of others. And I know a number of you in our body have brought your suffering to bear in the life of this church, where you have so encouraged and mutually encouraged others through the pain that God has brought you through in your lives. We all have some degree of time, of energy, of financial resources, of gifts. And so we're saying, God, what is my part? How do you want me to mutually encourage? What has God given you to contribute? And then are you? Are you contributing with what God has given to you? Now look, this first thing of why we're here and why we do church, to be together with thankfulness and prayer and for mutual encouragement, is good. It's necessary. It's very encouraging, but also it is inadequate if it stops there. It's not enough on its own. The church is designed to be together for mutual encouragement, and secondly, for gospel mission. Look at what Paul says as he goes on in verse 13. He says, I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters. I planned many times to come to you, but I've been prevented from doing so until now. But I'm getting ready to come, and that's why I'm writing the letter to get ready in advance. And I'm coming to you in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles. Now, what does Paul mean when he says, I'm coming to you and I want to have a harvest among you? Well, he doesn't say exactly, but we can imagine that probably what Paul is saying is there. Well, first of all, I want to bring this spiritual gift to you. I want you to grow. I want you to mature, a harvest of spiritual growth and maturity in the believers that are already there. But typically when we're talking about a harvest in the scriptures, we're talking about more people following Jesus, the message of Jesus spreading. And so we might imagine, as Paul is writing to the Roman Christians, he's writing to, maybe 100 Christians in the capital city of the Roman Empire, 100 Christians or so, that probably met in small house churches of 15 to 25. So you got maybe 4 to 6 little house churches of about 100 followers of Jesus in a capital city of perhaps 1 million people. So when Paul's saying, I want to see a harvest among you, he's saying still 99 90% of your population are not followers of Jesus Christ, and they need the gospel message. And I'm going to come together, we're going to mutually encourage each other, and we're going to reach your neighbors. And we're going to reach the rest of Rome as much as we can with the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what he's saying. And so then he says in verse 14, look, I am obligated, I am compelled, both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and to the foolish. What is he saying there? Well, if you've read the New Testament, you realize that one of the dichotomies that are often set out for us is this dichotomy of Jew and Gentile, right? That's the most common one. The Jews, God's chosen special people who were given the Old Testament scriptures, who God revealed his truth to. The Messiah came from the Jewish nation. And then all of the other people, right? The Gentiles, the dirty, the non-Jewish people. And often that's how the world was seen. Jews, good, God's people, and the Gentiles, those other people. Paul gives us another dichotomy that was common in his day here, which was between the Greeks and the non-Greeks. The Greeks probably meaning those who speak the right language, the good language, the refined language, the language of wisdom, and those then babblers. The word non-Greek actually was made nicer in this translation. It's actually the word barbarian. And barbarian is a word that means what it sounds like. It sounds like babblers. The Greeks, the refined ones, and then the babblers, the ones that are in and the ones that are out. The wise, he goes on, the astute of society, and the foolish, the ridiculous people. And you know that every single one of us struggle with this, and every culture deals with this, the people that are in and the people that are out. My people and those people, and them, those people over there, right? The good people and the bad people. We have some sayings, maybe you've heard this saying, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much, right? Okay, so there it is. In our day, we might say, as Paul comes here, it doesn't matter how people divide the world up, how people see the world. The gospel of Jesus Christ is for everyone, and God doesn't divide the world up that way, and neither will we. We're going to everyone, Greeks, non-Greeks, wise and the foolish, Jews and the Gentile. Today we might say binary and non-binary. The gospel is for everyone. The gospel is for every single person. And Paul says, I am bringing the message of Jesus Christ to everyone, and we're going to do this together. He says, verse 15, that is why I am so eager. I'm so zealous to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. And so secondly, the church is also for gospel mission. It's to be together for gospel mission. Meaning, like our coming together and being mutually encouraged, it has a target. It has a purpose. It has an outward look, which is gospel advancement. So while we want to be all warm and fuzzy in here, and don't hear me wrong, I want us to be warm and fuzzy. Jesus wants us to be warm and fuzzy. I want this to be a place where when you come in here, you are loved and you are cared for and it feels warm and the coffee is good, right? And like you enjoy your time here and you learn and you grow and you feel like this is family. And I think God wants that for us, but it cannot stop here. It cannot stop at that place, or hear me, it will implode. It will absolutely turn on itself. You know this. You know these snow days that we had recently? Where it was like snow day, 2-day weekend, holiday, snow day, and then you're like, we've got to get out of the house or we're going to kill each other. Like, I love you, I'm glad we could be together, I'm glad for some downtime, but enough is enough. We had services last week, even though it was like, I don't know, negative 87 degrees or whatever it was. And so we're like, you're having service, we're having service. And then a number of you, as you came, you're like, thank you for still having service. I had to get out of the house. I didn't know if I was going to come, but I had to get out of here, right? Why? Why is it like that? It's like that because it can't just be about me. And it can't just be about us. And it can't just be about being together, as good as being together is. There needs to be an outward look. There needs to be an engagement with others. There needs to be a mission. Listen to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. He said this, the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. The person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. But the person who loves those around them will create community. That's why I said when it's just about us and inside these walls and what we're doing here among ourselves, it's good, but it will implode if it's only about that. It has to be a mission. We have to love others. We have to have an eye towards the mission that God has given to us. And what ends up happening in that place when we're on mission with what Jesus is doing to our neighbors and people that are around us, we end up creating the very thing we're longing for. We end up creating community and a stronger bond with one another. And so when Paul writes to Rome, he's like, Roman church, I love you. I am for you. Let's build each other up so that we are ready to take the message of Jesus Christ to the rest of Rome and to beyond. So look, well, our church is not perfect. No church is, but I know NorthPoint is not perfect. We make mistakes. We don't get everything right. Not everything is as it should be. But if we are striving for an environment of thankfulness and prayer, and mutual encouragement, strong relationships that are centered on Jesus Christ, why would we not want more people to get in on it? Why would we not want more people to experience what he is allowing us to experience? In fact, in Paul's words, we are compelled, we are obligated to do that very thing, to invite more people into it. We are eager and passionate to invite them in. NorthPoint, there's over 700,000 people in the Des Moines metro area. We have over 100,000 people in our immediate area, many of whom do not know Jesus Christ, and they don't go to church. That's a mission. That's our mission. That's an opportunity that Jesus has given to us, and you work with those people. You work with them, and they're classmates with you and with your kids, and you live next to them. And so we're like the Blues Brothers, man. We're on a mission from God. And hopefully our mission's a little better than the Blues Brothers, but we are on a mission from God to reach people with his message. We have 4 schools in a 1-mile radius around our church. Grimes and Waukee are experiencing explosive growth in the Des Moines metro, and the population growth that the Des Moines metro has experienced, churches are not keeping up with the growth of the population around us. See, Paul sees Rome as a base camp for the mission of Jesus. How about NorthPoint as a base camp for the Des Moines metro, especially the northwest suburbs? Like I'm a little bit hesitant to say this, but I think it relates to how Paul was viewing the Roman church as a base camp, as an influential place from which the gospel could go out. That's what he says in verse 8, hey, your faith, Rome, it's being reported all over the world. Right? And so Paul's looking at that and saying, I love you, I'm going to care for you, I'm going to bring you a spiritual gift, and we are going to do the mission of Jesus together. That's what's going to happen, right? And so I say this, NorthPoint, we are the largest church in Johnston. And we could look at that and say, well, look at us, we're the largest church in Johnston. I don't care about that. Who cares that we are, except this, God has said, I'm going to allow you to have that, and I'm going to resource you with people, and I'm going to give you gifts, and I'm going to give you an opportunity, and I'm calling you into my mission. That's what it is. We have a responsibility with that. And we have an opportunity to see him work, to do something in our generation and in our families and in this community. It's like, as your pastor, my heart for NorthPoint, it really resonates with what Paul is saying here to the church in Rome. Our mission that God's given us is to cultivate communities filled with the grace and the truth of Jesus Christ. That relational community part's so important, the together, the building each other up, the mutual encouragement is so important. I want everybody that comes into this place to experience the grace and the truth of Jesus, to have your needs met, to be encouraged, to be helped when you go through crisis, a church that cries with you, that weeps with you, and that rejoices and celebrates all of the wins that you have in your life, a family that you know you belong to, no matter what. This is my favorite part of chapter 1 so far, verse 6. Look at verse 6. He says, you also are among those Gentiles who are called to belong to Jesus Christ. Oh my goodness, if we could understand what that means, that we belong to Jesus Christ. I so want that. And a family then that belongs to Jesus Christ and wants many, many more people to belong to him too. That we love the people around us and we want them to come into the grace and the truth of Jesus. There are so many more people to reach with the life-changing message and hope of Jesus. And he's given us the gospel, and he's giving us the people, and he's given us the resources to get after it. And so we have some plans for that, for getting after it. You see this idea of planning in Paul, to just point out briefly that planning is important, that Paul just doesn't say, well, that's the mission of Jesus, and we'll just wake up each morning and see what's going to happen. He makes plans. I've been planning a long time to come to you, and I plan to bring a spiritual gift to you, and I plan to be mutually encouraged by you, and I plan to go on to Spain after that. We make plans by God's grace and with his help, right? And so next Sunday, at our annual meeting, we're going to share some plans with you that we believe God has given to us, a vision for what's next in the mission that God's given. And later on, a little bit of part of that, and then a little later on, we'll talk about the strategy and the how and the specifics of it. But it all comes out of what we've seen here, being together for gospel mission. Or to say it our way, the next step in cultivating communities of grace and truth. So, can we journey in this together? Can we lock arms to each other? Can we get in community groups and Bible study and discipleship groups and build friendships and relationships centered on Jesus so that we give and that we receive together? And then as we lock arms, we look out to the communities and our neighbors around us and say, we got to get more people here. I mean, we got to get more people to trust in Jesus Christ by the grace of Jesus through the power of the Spirit, not forcing or manipulating people, but inviting them in to the life of Jesus Christ. Will you be a part of this? Will you join this mission that Jesus has given to us? You know, there's a morning devotional that I listen to called Lectio 365. And if you're still kind of learning to do devotions, that is to just have daily time with God, this might be a good thing for you. It's an app that you can just look up, Lectio, Lectio 365. And listening this last week, there was a lady named Jill Weber that provided the devotionals for this week. It's about a 10-minute morning devotional. Jill is a prayer leader that has devoted her life to leading other people in prayer and growing in prayer. And in one of the devotions this week, she said this. She said, I've learned to say to God, the answer is yes. And now what's the question? I've learned to say to God, whatever information he's given me, whatever direction he's given me, even if I don't understand it, I don't completely know what he means, I say yes. The first response is yes. And then hopefully he'll give me some more information about what he wants me to do, but my heart is to say yes to you. I've learned to say to God, the answer is yes. And now what's the question? Would you say yes to God? To being the church together, first of all, to contributing and to receiving and to being fully engaged in his mission. Would you pray with me?